Welcome to Secrets Out Idaho. Each week, we let you in on the secrets of Southern Idaho and speak to the people who make it such a unique hidden gem. I'm your host, Connie Stouffer. On this week's episode, we'll hear what it was like to start a business, write a book, and raise a family in Twin Falls, Idaho. All after escaping genocide and becoming a refugee when we speak to author and entrepreneur Liyah Babayan. She'll share her journey to achieving the American dream in part one of this two-part episode. Liyah Babayan, thank you so much for joining me on Secrets Out Idaho. I'm really excited to have you here and talk to you about your story and learn more about you.
Thank you for extending the invitation, and I'm excited to be part of your season 2.
Wonderful. Thank you. So first, I'm just going to have you tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I was born in Azerbaijan, country that's south of Russia. Used to be part of the Soviet Union, was one of the republics. And my family, we experienced the aftermath of the wall coming down, the Berlin Wall coming down, and the ethnic tensions that really intensified and increased throughout the Soviet republics. More specifically in Azerbaijan, that was in response to land that was being disputed, whether it is sovereign land and the people were a sovereign country of Nagorno-Karabakh, or if it belonged to Armenia or to Azerbaijan, because with independence and nationalism on the rise, a lot of that tension just magnified. So what that experience is like at the ground level for people and communities. So Armenians were the minorities in Azerbaijan, the Christian minority in a predominantly Muslim country. So what that experience was like is at that time, politicians really echoed anti-Armenian sentiment and the othering of Armenians within Azerbaijan. A lot of us and them division, and it fueled the emotions then into the actions of violence. So we survived a genocide, an ethnic killing that took place there, and were forced to leave our home and flee to stay alive, becoming refugees. So about 4 years after that is how my family ended up being resettled by the international community. We were resettled to the United States. Our case was picked up by the United States. And then further, it was picked up by Idaho refugee resettlement programs. And we were then in 1992 resettled in Twin Falls, Idaho. That's how we ended up here. That's how my family of 4 ended up uprooting, not by choice, but by force, when I was the age of 10, and then being brought here to the United States, and being then further brought over to Idaho, and then planting our new roots here in Twin Falls. This is 25 years ago.
25 years ago. So you've been here for a while, but certainly at the age of 10, you had a history in your own home and with your family, and going through all of the uncertainty and trauma of essentially losing your home and then having to find a new home in a place you'd never been before. Can you tell me what it was like when you landed here in Twin Falls for you or for your family, and kind of some of those feelings you had when you got here?
Right. At that point, so when you're a child of war, you grow up very fast. You lose the innocence of being neutral or immune to what's happening around you. You become observant, and you internalize a lot of what's going on around you. More, I think so, because of the survival mechanism in all of us. So my family, we were very established. We lived very well in Azerbaijan. I come from a long history of heritage, of generations of history, of financial assets, business owners, merchants. So on my father's side of the family, there was that same legacy. And then on my mother's side of the family, my grandfather was in the oil business, which is the black gold of the Caspian Sea. In that area, that's a major export. So financially and by asset standards and quality of life standards, the kind of life we lived there, it will probably take myself, my children, and their children living here in the United States, if we're building on an upward scale on one another's advancement, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
or progress,
Mm-hmm.
it will take us 3 generations to rebuild the level of quality of life we were living and enjoying before the
Mm-hmm.
chaos and the war happened.
Mm-hmm.
So we didn't just lose, home and stuff and belongings. Those things are so petty. They don't measure a human's value or a human's worth.
Mm-hmm.
What we really lost was our mental peace, our identity, our pre-trauma identities. We lost our sense of self in the world, our purpose.
Mm-hmm.
We were robbed of our purpose because our purpose, living the lives we were living on that continent with that identity there, the purpose was not to survive. The purpose was to enjoy life.
Mm-hmm.
Everything since then has been in survival mode,
Mm-hmm.
including rebuilding our new lives and our fragmented identities and learning this new language of Western English language
Mm-hmm.
that was not a part of my life before.
Mm-hmm.
So we lost so much more than stuff. And we're disconnected from our mother tongue and our motherland and our relatives. All of our relatives over there. So to arrive here with nothing but trauma into a new society, in a new country, in a new community, was beyond emotionally possible for one person to navigate on their own.
Mm-hmm.
So as a family, growing up in a traumatized family with parents and family members who have chronic PTSD, we really just had to help one another navigate our new lives here.
Mm-hmm.
And getting our new balance, understanding our new place in the world.
Mm-hmm.
We're still doing that. There's not like a phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4.
Mm-hmm.
When you become a displaced person in the world and survive violence and war, that you're going to go through these phases, and then there's like this concrete timeline.
You're like, oh, okay, everything's fine now. It's always going to be a part of you.
Like we fixed it now,
Mm-hmm.
or
Yeah.
it's done.
Yeah.
Like we're done. No, it actually, studies show, and also generational interviews within like Holocaust survivors, and even before that, just anybody like Native Americans and indigenous people who have survived genocide, policy of genocide. It's a intergenerational trauma that is passed on to children and children and children after that. So this, you can't separate the spirit, the mind, and the body in a person. Even when it comes to applying yourself creatively to a project or building a business, you're a whole human package. You approach everything you do in life with your wholeness, or fragmented. And if it's fragmented, it shows.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's fragmented, it doesn't fulfill. It might have a bottom line, but it doesn't, it might show a bottom line as a plus, but it doesn't fulfill your
Mm-hmm.
journey, your human journey.
Mm-hmm.
So why I'm saying all of that is because as refugees, we begin with a negative, in the negative.
Mm-hmm.
Not only that, but we're not equipped with those basic tools like language, understanding the economy, understanding capitalism. We came from a communism system,
Mm-hmm.
state-owned production,
Mm-hmm.
capitalism, entrepreneurship, free market. These are concepts that even Americans that have grown up in this place don't even always know,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So imagine being dropped out of the sky from one set of laws and economic nature, I guess, for lack of a better word for it, system, and then just literally being dropped out of the sky into a brand new environment without the tool of language, without having orientation of those systems, without having an interpreter, and not even knowing your own individual rights in this country. What are my rights as a property owner, as someone that's taking a loan out, as someone that's being pulled over by a police officer? Where do I get permits? What's a permit?
Yeah, what is
this permit? So arriving in this country in the negatives, and then outside the margins of society, so far from access from information, access.
Especially in the early 90s when there wasn't the internet where you could just Google.
Absolutely.
What do I do?
Yeah. Google definitely has changed the game, but arriving into a new country and being on the outside of society, outside the margins, really being marginalized past the margins, really, and not having even access to information. And on top of that, that's one part of it, but on top of that, at the same exact time, there's the pressure to be self-sufficient, assimilate. And I'm not a fan of that word, but in other words, the pressure to integrate. So that task is on you, and be off the refugee program within 8 months. So, that's the thing. The refugee program is this 8-month program, and many refugees, at least when we arrived, and even now, they're off that program on an average between 3 to 4 months. Quickly staffed into an entry-level job position to pay for life. You have to, nothing in America is free. You have to pay for everything. So what many people don't realize is that refugees, when they arrive to the United States, our airplane tickets are pre-purchased for us. So a family of 4, what's an airplane ticket from half across the world? Let's say
$2,000.
$2,000.
Yeah.
So you arrive in this country, and immediately upon arriving, you're already in debt before you have any income coming in.
They have you pay those tickets?
They have to be paid back within 8 months.
Oh, wow.
They have to be paid back within 8 months. And if it's not paid on time or back, it counts against your credit history.
Oh, wow.
So you're starting a brand new life in this country. You don't even know what credit history is, because in most countries in the world, in most cultures in the world, to be in debt is a dishonor. But in the United States, you can't financially survive if you don't have history of what is your pattern of paying back loans. This whole nation runs on debt. Yeah. Literally. So if you don't know that system, and you don't know that it's counting even against you if you're payment late, you screw up your own chances, as far as getting into a rental or buying a car. Everything. So, you begin your life outside the margins of society. You begin your new life as a refugee in the United States in debt. And at the same time, the program is designed to fill low-wage, entry-level job positions. But it is what it is. This is the conditions and the environment that people arrive into this country through the program into. And this is, you pointed out in the 90s where there was less awareness. Refugees in Twin Falls were just an unknown, invisible kind of underground, almost like community that guided each other. So blind leading the blind through navigating systems. It takes, if not a decade or two, to get your sea legs in this country, to really get it, to really get a pulse on the movement, the momentum. And on top of that, you're, raising babies and life's happening and death's happening and teenagers are happening, and your teenagers are growing up in a country you as a parent have no understanding of. So you're literally, you yourself as a parent are being worked and separated, your experience of the United States is completely different than your child's experience, who is submerged in the culture through school and knows way too much more about this country than you do as a grown up. So they have kind of an advantage, not just only through language, but the cultural integration.
Yeah.
So this is kind of the separation that's taking place in the two generations within the same home and how they're assimilating. And then on top of that, the economic understanding of, how to do things. The children are learning in a more natural way, and the parents are having to really kind of just be very cautious on how they are economically engaging. So that first generation, could be nervous about taking a economic risk, unless it has to do with the immediate things like shelter and car.
So it really slows down that rebuilding process if they feel hesitant about starting
timid.
A business or buying a home or things like that.
I mean, they are buying homes at a very fast rate, and because it just makes sense to, because again, being in debt is not something that is favored in most cultures and countries.
But here it's just assuming you're going to take out a loan to buy a house.
Here it's just like, well, or rent. Why own if I could rent? And it's just like, why rent if I can own? Yeah. Own something. It doesn't make sense for me to rent and not own it. So I think that it's very interesting to see how the economic behavior of new Americans and refugees, and how they're conservative and what they choose to invest in, and what those short-term, long-term patterns are like. I think that would be a really interesting study to kind of zoom in into. So
what were some of the things that were the most helpful to you and your family during those first year or first 10, 20 years that really made it easier or contributed to you guys being able to find your way?
Nothing.
Nothing.
I'm going to be very honest. Nothing. Yeah. We're talking 92, 93, 94, 95, 96, 97. This is before so much happened in this country and in development of technology. We were brought here, and we had a 2-hour orientation. And there was, after that, maybe one follow-up with our case manager. And then very quickly, my parents, who were both extremely traumatized from everything we just survived. And we were homeless for 4 years. So going through being homeless is a compounding trauma on top of the fact that we just survived the violence. That compounded trauma really stole my parents away from me. I was parented by the trauma, not by the parents, the whole healthy parents. So very quickly, both my father and my mother were staffed into entry-level positions, of course, and they had to take the first job that was offered to them. You don't get to select and be picky about, well, I don't want to work that, or I'm way underqualified for that. I'm not going to work a janitor job when I'm educated in this space. But you don't get to pick. You go wherever that shortage is, and you don't pick. And you also, if you don't, pick that job, then you're not going to survive. Or if you're not going to go to that job,
because you got to pay back that airplane ticket.
You got to start. That bill comes in. Yeah. The bill comes in right away, and there's interest on it. So someone is definitely profiting off these airplane tickets, and it's not just one or two. These plane tickets are probably being purchased in bulk. So, you have to start paying bills as soon as you get here. And at that time, so we're talking 92, in the 90s, 92, 93, 94, all those 90s years, the refugee center was, in a small house with a few staff members. There was no vans that would take you to your doctor's appointments,
and they have those now, right?
Now it's different. Now it's different. In the recent years, there's been more awareness about these needs and connections to resources. Yes. But not when we arrived here. And the pressure to to be self-sufficient, it discouraged my parents from going to English classes. They could not go to English classes because when can they go to an English class if they're working 2 full-time jobs? So their language was disabled. Their potential language learning experience in this country was definitely disabled by the pressure to be self-sufficient and assimilate. And as far as economically, provide for your family. My mother would ride, or many refugees, my mother wouldn't ride a bike, but my father and many other refugees would ride their bikes in the dead of winter, from one side of this town to another. And that was transportation for many months, if not years, until you could buy a car, some kind of car. And my mother would walk, in that weather. And there's nothing wrong with walking and with riding bikes. That's healthy actually. But in the dead of winter,
Idaho winters,
in Idaho,
yeah,
and
especially when you've got kids and you've got to get groceries home, and there's not public transportation,
and so this is these are all factors. These are all factors into someone being able to reestablish their life. So when we talk about equal opportunity, I mean, that's a false positive when it comes to refugees. It sounds good. It's nostalgic, but equal opportunity is not available to those that are outside the margins of society economically.
Yeah.
I mean, we can.
It's only equal opportunity if you all start out equal. If one starts out at a disadvantage, then it's not the same. Right.
And when we talk about equality too, it's not about everyone being the same, because everybody has different talents and different passions. I don't want to be like everybody else, and I would never want a world of everybody being exactly like me. I mean, we would get nothing done. And when we talk about that, it's the other kind of equality. It's the equality of ability to speak a language, reach information, fill out a application form, get a decent call back for at least an interview, and not just be discriminated against because of your name or because your documents say that you're not a citizen, you're a resident alien, or you have a green card as a form of ID. That's the equality, the chance, the equal chance to be productive in a society. That's, I think, the equality I would choose to focus in on, that really made a difference in our life. But when I think back, I mean, your question of, well, what really helped, and how, when you first arrived here, I think that was your question, is what really helped? Nothing helped.
It sounds like, though, that
nothing helped.
That maybe nothing externally helped, but maybe something internally within you and your family to drive. Yeah.
What helped was our faith. What helped was our collective wounds and pain, that we were able to really be a family and lift each other up even a little bit. What helped was other Armenians and other Russian and Bosnian. At that time, I'm just kind of in Laotian. At that time, a lot of Vietnamese and Laotian refugees who had maybe a 6-month or a 2-month or a 2-year or 3-year advantage over us, or a 10-year advantage over us as far as navigating the system on their own. And, holding us by our hand and saying, hey, this is how you do this. This is how you fill out an application. If you're hurt, this is what you do. Hey, it's okay to call 911. They won't come and hurt you. The police here won't hurt you. Or don't bribe the police here. I mean, this is... Yeah.
Those are realities in other countries.
These are realities. These are real systems in other countries. And when you come here and people don't orient you in a new country, and you don't know what the rules are, and you don't know what your individual rights are, you don't know who to complain to, that there's this commission and this committee and this board and this phone number and this hotline. There's all these different places of not only government, but agency oversight, like with HUD and with all of these different places or with schools, you don't understand how, you don't necessarily know how to navigate. Well, then you understand, you come to an understanding that that's not for me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm here to do this. I'm here to work.
Mm-hmm. And now, just a quick break. Support for this episode comes from Compalo Chevrolet. Compalo Chevrolet will not be undersold when it comes to your next new car or truck. Plus, get a warranty forever. You heard that right, a warranty forever. Compalo Chevrolet is close to everyone in the Magic Valley. Located off exit 168 on I-84 in Jerome. Compalo Chevrolet, serving families in Idaho since 1922, and your first stop for your next new car or truck. When I just think if the roles were reversed and I all of a sudden found myself in Armenia, I wouldn't know where to start. I obviously don't speak the language. I don't know how things work. And I think sometimes it's helpful if people, even though it would be hard to, but to try to put yourself in the position of somebody who is new and everything is different. And I think people would have a little bit more compassion for what that experience might be like.
Sure. Well, and especially, okay, so I like what you just said about, for example, if the roles were reversed and you uprooted and had to go to Armenia, you would have more support because people speak English there.
That's true.
They do. That you might not have like institutional support, like there's agencies here that help people integrate. And now there's a lot more resources through the refugee program, like language classes and global talent, which helps people if they have a diploma and a career, they help align them back into their career. But here, not only did people not speak another language, but there was no access to interpreters. And also at that time, we just were these kind of people that didn't fit in. I mean, everybody thought we were just Mexicans here, but we didn't even speak Spanish. So then we were really weird because we didn't speak English or Spanish. So we probably really came across as dumb or as mutes. We just did not have an ability to communicate.
Well, there's a lady I know who is in a group I know, and she's a friend of mine, and she thought that I spoke Spanish because I'm Hispanic, which is not an unusual thing for someone to think, but I didn't. And so when she spoke Spanish to me, I just kind of stared at her and she was like, oh, right. And so, but she and I could still communicate. And so I could imagine in a situation where someone would speak English to you or speak Spanish to you, and then they would just be at a loss, and you're at a loss because you're like, I don't know what's happening now. And so I think it's hard for most people to put themselves in that situation and then be able to progress from there. And so that's where I kind of want to transition and talk about all the amazing things you're doing, because you've started a business and written a book. And so tell me about the process of what inspired you to start a business, what your business is, and what that process was like for you.
Yeah.
Going from not speaking the language and knowing how to navigate capitalism to being a business owner. I think it's pretty amazing.
Right. Yeah. That's, I love that question because that's the legacy of my family, that my children and my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren and my brother's children will, I want to say, grow from. And so there's just such a responsibility to get it right at our level, our generation. Fresh off the plane refugees. I mean, that's such a responsibility. So the burden and the responsibility of not just rebuilding our life, but at the same time, so three things really are happening at the same time. We're rebuilding the past. We're maintaining and living the present, because those bills come in every, 28 to 30 days or whatever. And so then at the same time, with whatever resources possible, we are establishing a humble foundation, right? So living three lifetimes in a way, in one lifetime. And we're doing, and like I said, with equal opportunity, with refugees, they don't have that same access to this American dream. I mean, we're literally rebuilding our lives with the crumbs of the American dream. So how is it possible? The sentimental how is something I talk about in my TED Talk. And I'm not going to necessarily give it all away.
Well, yeah, we'll have to check it out.
But those three are universal keys to success that everyone can learn from refugees. They are hunger, interdependence, and unconditional gratitude. And I go into those a little more and explain them.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to how did I start a business, going from the past and going forward, it is an interdependent process. It is the learning of all the skills I've learned through my family and through the entrepreneurship of my grandparents and my parents. Because although we lived in a communist society, there's entrepreneurship going on everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So the counter economy in the Soviet Union, the black market, the counter economy was stronger than the state economy, meaning people were participating in entrepreneurship, in the exchange of commodities and goods, and doing it in a very true way. So truly a free market, unregulated, obviously. And it's a supply and demand dance. And when you get that, when it's a sense, whether your parents, they pass that on to you or you just inherently just pick it up, I think that's what being an entrepreneur is. It's a sixth sense. And you just know how to apply that then to the area that you're passionate about. For me, it was a decision that was made out of necessity instead of a want or a desire or this curiosity, I guess, of what it will be like to be a business owner. My education focus and my education path was in international scene and political science and military sciences. So my bachelor's was focused in that area. It was not in business. I never studied business. This is before YouTube, so I never watched a how to start your business YouTube video or Googled it. I don't think I've even been in even an hour-long business workshop ever, even now that I'm in business. So it was truly a risk, being that we had no capital, and I was fresh out of university with student loans. So no one was going to loan money at the peak of the recession. We're talking 2006, 2007, going into a bank and saying, I have no business background. I have a outstanding student loan. I'm 22 years old. I know nothing about business. Would you give me some money, please? Yeah, no. My parents have no collateral. I have no collateral. And so that was out of the question. So I was, at that time, so this is 2006, I was in Amsterdam. Did
you go to school there, or was it?
I was in the process of this internship and exploring some other opportunities there, but no, I didn't go to school there. But it was along the lines of what I was doing at school. So it was on my flying back to the United States. Because this was after I already went back to Armenia. I already went back to Armenia, and I had this experience thinking, well, maybe this is where I need to replant my roots. Or, what's the opportunity like of our family? Is there an opportunity that we're going to, move away or move back? Because Twin Falls felt like a base at that time. But we still knew that we were the outsiders. We felt like it was not, we were guests. So we just felt we were outsiders. We knew we were outsiders, because that's kind of the way that all the things around us, I don't want to say the people, I want to say the institutions kind of let us know that that's our place. Just being, excluded or invisible or all of that. You just know. So on my flight back to the United States, I really reflected and thought, well, what is it going to look like for my family 10 years from now, 20 years from now, when I would like to see my parents retire? They have worked so hard. They have slaved, and they have paid with their back and with their lungs, inhaling chemicals as janitors. I mean, they are not going to work longer. They're paying with their lives. So what does this look like? What can I do? And I realized that whatever I do is going to be a business. I mean, I didn't choose clothing. I didn't choose boutique. I didn't choose the space of women as my demographic. Those components all kind of came together after my research. I'm probably the last person that you would want to take shopping with me as far as my patience and dislike for shopping itself.
I don't know. You're just very cute today. So I don't know. I would take you with me.
Well, now that Ooh La La has trained me, I have a different ability now. I have a different skill. So styling is a skill I've acquired. But the activity of shopping, that itself is a very Western thing. We don't necessarily have that in our culture. Shopping is a concept. It's a pastime that I had to learn because growing up in our home, my mom didn't go shopping. The women in my community didn't go shopping. I mean, one, we were so poor, there was no reason to. But even window shopping, I mean, that's something I had to learn. I'm like, what do you mean? You just go to look? Doesn't that just leave you depressed?
I'm not a fan of window shopping for that very reason, because then I'm like,
I just don't. I've never developed the habit or the patience to be a shopper. Well, my best friend, she can do shopping marathons, and I'll go with her, and I'm I'm like the one that's complaining and wants a snack right away because I'm already done.
Yeah.
But she's an excellent shopper, and she's very natural at it. But to me, it was something I had to learn. So being in the boutique business is definitely far from any of my intentions or passions 12 years ago. You know, I just wasn't that person to think that I was going to be in a career path of running a boutique or working in that space. So, but I thought it through. I thought it through as far as, well, what can I do to create a dependable flow of income to take care of my family? This is before children. I wasn't thinking to even have children. For mainly thinking of my grandparents and my parents, because for us, family is truly everything. It's not just a word. It is our whole identity and our honor. So caring for our family is very important. So thinking about what I could do, I thought, well, the education path I'm in looks like this. I'm going to be an intern and then a page and a secretary. And by the time I'm even able as a woman, as a refugee woman in this country, to get into any kind of a real administrative position, I mean, what are really my chances, and how old will my parents be then is my decision maker. I can put my career on pause. I can put a lot of things on pause, but them getting older isn't one of those options, or my grandparents. So I thought, well, what can I do with zero capital to create a profit? And the zero capital part is so important because it's like, that's either you have gravity or you don't.
And that's, I mean, we talk to people who are entrepreneurs wanting to start businesses all the time, and we have to tell them that it's going to be really hard for them to go get a traditional loan from a bank if they have zero capital, if they have zero experience running a business, if this is their first business, they're going to get turned down. And so even more so if, you know, you have all these other hurdles too, it makes it even more difficult. So
absolutely. Yeah. And age. I mean, when you're younger, I mean, banking just has this distrust of, well, you're the reckless.
How much experience could you possibly have if you're 22?
Yeah, well, and you're in that reckless category. You know, you're young, and they're not going to take that chance on you, especially during a recession. And so, you know, really weighing and calculating and really thinking through the risk, you know, thinking of, well, we could lose, you know, whatever little bit that we have if I do this wrong. That to me was the best influencer of the kind of decision I was going to make, because that was in the back thought always. Well, this is a big risk. You know, we could really we really can lose every little crumb that we've built with already if I do it wrong. Because the debt collectors don't care if you're a refugee or if you have no assets. They'll come and get whatever they can. And so at that time, I really, I remember I have this cocktail napkin from Delta. And that's my business plan. Literally, that's like everything I ever wrote about my business is on this cocktail napkin where
on your way back from Amsterdam?
On my way back from Amsterdam, obviously having a few maybe cocktails. But I wrote on there, at the very top is financial freedom for my family was the goal. And then right under it, zero capital. That's the reality. So I have my goal right there and I have my reality right there. Now, how do I get
from point A to point B?
I mean, how do I get there? I mean, so then a few drinks later, I don't think I had that many drinks on that flight, but I'm just trying to kind of take you through the thought process. A few thoughts later, I just really had to really think about, okay, in America, and again, I don't have experience of shopping. I don't know what the economy's like. I'm literally someone that's been living on my own for less than 6 years. So what can I possibly know about, real economics? So I thought to myself, okay, well, right now, this is going on in the United States. There's, people are losing their homes. There's a recession. People aren't buying luxuries. They're conservative with their fiscal decisions right now. And also they are, there's financial insecurity is the mood, is the emotion. What can I do with all of those things in existence? What can I do that would survive that? And then who can I depend on to spend money when all those things are going on? Recession, insecurity, interest rate, or inflation, deflation, right? And the one area that both of those answers met at was women. And I thought, okay, women spend money all the time. They are the accountants of their household, whether they're single or married, or they are the accountants. And women will spend money on themselves, even if a nuclear blast goes off. And
because it's one way I'm not immune to this too, but like a new dress will make me feel happy. It'll make me, it'll fill a little hole in there sometimes.
Women reassure and reinforce their state of security through purchase. And that's nails, hair, makeup, perfume, clothing. And because women have in the United States a very, I would say, recent and liberating safe freedom to wear whatever they want, right? This post all the revolutions and everything that women have fought for. I mean, they fought for this liberating fashion freedom.
Well, I actually just read, it was maybe a year ago, that it's bad for the diamond industry because women are buying their own diamonds now. They're not waiting for men to buy their diamonds for them. They're buying their own. I think it's partly because women are more empowered. They're
or like the right hand ring, the right ring finger. Of this is the ring I bought for myself, ring finger. Yes, definitely. The women, if you watch women, if you want to understand any society as far as its economic pulse, you have to tap into the women. So whether there's a recession or not, they're shopping, they're buying. And that's not to paint women as these like shopping.
Not the sense they're irresponsible.
Machines. No, it's just that's again to reinforce and reassure to themselves their sense of security. And there's also the pressure on women in society, with hair and nails and for you to, keep a career or get into a career. There is aesthetics
you have to look
and vanity, especially here in the Western culture, is priority. So I didn't really need to do a judgment of it. I just had to be honest and accept it. Because to look into it philosophically or judge it, I mean, that's not going to provide for my family. But what I can do is get a pulse of the reality and see where my talents can meet it. So I thought, you know what? I can depend on women. No matter what's going on, I can depend on women and girls. And then what do I do? I knew what I didn't want to do. That's probably one of my strongest traits, is knowing what I don't want to do, because it liberates me from wasting time or partnerships that aren't aligned to my values or authentic in our engagement. But then also just coming back to living a very passionate and purposeful life. When you eliminate what you don't want, what you do want is obviously there. So I thought, I can't cut hair. I don't want to learn how to cut hair. Yeah. I barely am passionate about brushing or styling my own hair. I'm not a fanatic of makeup. I'm not passionate about it. I will do mine just so that I am decent when I show up to work. But it's not taking me more than a few minutes, and I'm not doing a YouTube video about it. Like, this is not what excites me. And I just thought of those industries that I couldn't fit into, that I would be a disservice in. And again, the no capital was a guiding factor, because to get beauty school certified, that's, $7,000 or $8,000 or $9,000. We didn't have that. I didn't have that kind of money. My parents didn't have that kind of money. So the model of creating a co-op really became a model that I didn't even know existed, but I knew was the only one that I could function within, with my limitations of what my reality was, especially with capital. So then consignment became a big option, and then something that also aligned with my values as far as minimizing waste and not supporting economically sweatshops and mass-produced fashion and fast fashion, because those women and girls on that side of the world are paying with their lives what we consume cheaply. I didn't want a part of that. And again, this is not a judgment statement as far as how traditional retail is. My soul didn't want a part of that.
Well, because it goes back to being passionate. You're not going to be passionate about it if you know that it's not true to your values.
And like I was saying earlier about bringing your whole self into a project and being creative, if my goal was to provide for my family, so the profit is the bread and butter going into my family's mouth, my mouth, compromising values, compromising beliefs, and how I see another human being. Because just a few years ago, I was on the other side of the world. I was on that continent. Those are my aunties and cousins and relatives being exploited. I can't eat with that. I can't feed my body or my soul with that. It doesn't matter what the profit margin is. For me, the decision was very easy to make, and was very much embraced by the women of this community and by women who also are aligned with that same value. So consignment became the business model. Having no capital really drove the fact that we had to open it up to what other people had to sell, what artists could create, what painters were painting, and what small scale vendors wanted to share with our community. So creating the space, framing it within the values, and I guess staffing it with the right personalities, brought it all together. And it has been one of the most amazing and fulfilling accidental decision of my life. It really has. And I have learned so much. Most of what I've learned has been from people who walk through my doors at my business. That's my business school. So after 10 years...
Learning on the job.
Absolutely. So after 10 years, so Ooh La La's now in its 12th year. And that's going through the recession years and establishing. I mean, those are tough years. People don't realize how tough those years were. And moving our business twice, 2 locations. And you lose people when you do that. They just, they just don't know where you are. But after 12 years, or I'm sorry, we're in our 12th year, but I said when Ooh La La turned 10, I said, I feel like I can finally start a business. I've learned enough to start a business. After 10 years.
After 10 years.
I felt not only that I knew I could start a business, but I felt confident that I could start a business. And I did. I started a business in another company in a completely different industry, again, from zero knowledge and just to really challenge myself.
And that's where we're going to take a break. Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode. Stay tuned next week for the second half of Liyah's story and her surprising advice for what to do when life gives you potatoes. Thanks for listening to Secrets Out Idaho. You can follow Southern Idaho Economic Development on social media or visit southernidaho.org to learn more. Please take a moment to leave a rating and review and subscribe so you can be the first to hear more Secrets Out Idaho. Until next time.